Mm.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's going on? I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Welcome to drboycetv.com, the home for intelligent Black people. My name is Dr. Boyce Watkins. I want to say hello to Atlanta's Black Wall Street and Paul Thomas, who says this to be the shortest podcast ever. I think that's so funny. And today we were talking about after I sneeze, we're talking about athletes who lose all their money and the entertainers who lost all their money. And two people's whose names came up were Mike Tyson and Lamar Odom. And those two names came up because Madam President and I were talking about this. And I want to ask Madam President, how you doing today, sister?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Watkins. God bless you.
Thank you, thank you. I know I'm sneezy, dopey and sneezy. That's what I am. So, um, anyway, I want to welcome everybody as you come in. Hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe. I want to say welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you all are here. So let's just jump right into it. You were talking about Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson has been very vocal about the fact that he lost $400 million over time, and he says that it's because people robbed him and things like that. And I don't doubt that. I know Mike Tyson had some financial challenges and things like that throughout the years. And let's see, somebody says let's see, Atlanta's Black Wall Street says Mike told a story where he was throwing millions of dollars out the car window to random people. Well, that just in case y'all want some quick, free financial advice, if you want to build wealth, don't throw your money out the window. But anyway, so Mike had an interesting life. Mike made some interesting choices. Chanel, what say you in terms of why this even came up as a conversation topic for you, or why this came to mind?
Well, I actually was reading an article today where Lamar Odom was in financial turmoil. He was suing his manager for stealing money. She was frauding him, even was stealing his property from him. So he's going through that. And when I thought about it, it also made me think about Mike Tyson. He was in a very similar situation when it came to basically him losing lots of money. Undisputed is one of my favorite stand-up television shows. I think it was produced by Spike Lee, and it was surprisingly a good stand-up. Mike Tyson is literally on stage for about an hour and 30 minutes, and he's just doing a tell-all. And in Undisputed, he mentioned that he had $400 million once in the palm of his hands. Most of us can only dream of having $400 million. Most of us will probably never sit in a room or across the table with someone who says, I had $400 million in my hand. So I felt it was just very fascinating. But what was so interesting was he had an entourage of people that was on payroll, and the legendary Don King was stealing from him high and low.
Allegedly. Let's say allegedly, because I don't want to. Well, let me jump in and just say I think we should say allegedly because, if you talk about Lamar Odom, his lawsuit, he's suing. The lady's name is Tonita Bybee, and he's claiming she took from him. But we don't know for sure, right? It's easy for somebody who doesn't, if they don't want to have accountability for their bad choices, to come back and say, y'all was stealing from me, y'all was stealing from me, right? And I just want to make that clear because I think that we assume, if a celebrity goes broke and they say so-and-so stole from me, that must have been what happened. But that ain't always what happened, right? And it's unfortunate because sometimes people's reputations get ruined, their business gets destroyed, nobody trusts them. And it might be because you took a chance on somebody who was struggling, like Tyson and Lamar were both on drugs. They both were drug users. So, I think if somebody's untrustworthy, drug addicts aren't exactly the most trustworthy people. How do you sort between those two?
Oh, you know what, Dr. Watkins, I like when you talk like this because, this is not very often that I am in opposition with you because I agree with you very frequently. But the one thing that I want to talk about is these were not, crackheads. These were functioning drug addicts, people who were functioning, utilizing drugs while also performing at a high level. I mean, of course, they have a lot of things that got in the way of their life, and I am not pro drugs at all. I'm not a drug user, don't recommend it. But I will say that I would never want to categorize these men solely as that, because these men were once in the prime of their life as athletes. Now they are also in part of I would say, sometimes Hollywood or fame can have a very reckless background environment. So if you go into that space and you don't have a lot of discipline, and if you look at these men, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they came from very beautiful households where there was this loving family that raised them up and showed them how to manage money, or they didn't have a Dr. Watkins to teach them, finance. So I believe that they had bad habits, but they had allegedly a group of people around them that was also kind of taking advantage of their vulnerability. Think about it. If you got a person, I think when we think about a lot of times, we think about some of our celebrities and how they got into it with the law, with women, a lot of times drugs and alcohol is involved. So these are the environments where like you lose your decision making, like you're just not making good choices. So these are the perfect victims to steal from, because they were, uneducated, especially as it relates to finance.
Well, you know what? I agree. I agree with you 100% in terms of what you're saying. And you're right. I think that, if there's a difference between a high functioning drug user versus a non-functioning drug user for sure. But still, drugs causes poor decision making, right? Yes. And so I think that when you're talking about Lamar Odom, I know Lamar Odom was suing his former manager. I forgot her name, Bybee. Bybee's her last name. I kind of process this in terms of saying, I wonder what really happened, right? Like, according to Lamar, he's claiming that she forged his signature and all these other things. But remember that those things have to be proven in court, right? And then the other part is, not to say that she should never do something like that, but I wonder if she might have had a scenario, because remember, they were very close. They were very cool. At one point, he was talking about how she's helping him and doing all these other things and taking a chance on him. And then the next minute, it's like, oh, you stole from me. You stole from me. And so ultimately, what I would say is that, it's just one of those things where when I look at Mike and I look at Lamar losing their money, I look at Mike and Lamar first. Mike and Lamar are the reason Mike and Lamar don't get, lost their money. I don't really, like they a lot of people, they'll lose everything and then they'll come back and say, this person robbed me and that person robbed me. Okay, well, Mike Tyson was the baddest man on the planet. Ain't no man gonna walk up and just beat him up and take his money. So if you got robbed, how did that occur? Like, tell me how that happened, because in many cases, it might have been, you might have gotten manipulated, or maybe you could argue you got exploited. But I really think that we have to get past the mindset of saying that if you're smarter than me, you're more prepared than me, and you read your contracts and I don't read my contracts, that somehow you tricked me, you fooled me, you're a bad person. It's like, no, what am I supposed to make myself dumb like you? I respect people that protect their interests. I think that that's what everybody's supposed to do. But unfortunately, with the black athlete, there is a habit of getting so caught up with the money and the women and the fame and the clout that you're not thinking about contracts and all those other things. You're trying to get on stage. You're trying to win a championship. You're trying to look good, look fly for the hoes, whatever you're trying to do. And you ain't thinking like, okay, I need to also be smart and protect my money. Because Steph Curry, you ain't gonna hear Steph Curry run around talking about everybody robbed me. Steph Curry ain't going broke. He gonna keep that $40 million a year, and he's gonna be a billionaire if he's not there already. So what do you think is the difference? Do you think that sometimes it's culture that might play a part in this?
Oh my God. When you think about Steph Curry, most people thinking about the father, who was also a former NBA player, the mother who was, cultivating him and nurturing him. He come from a 2-parent household. I mean, Steph Curry was the kind of kid that was going to Bible camp. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make excuses for the black men, Lamar Odom or Mike Tyson, but I am going to highlight that they come from completely different environments than Steph Curry. I mean, like you said, just decision makings. And if we just really take a moment and think about when you join in the NBA, or when you're a professional boxer, you're hired with so many admin that you are not really handling your own affairs. That's one of the things about being a celebrity. And also, I want to highlight that that's one of the things about being billionaires too. The difference between some of these people that's been able to ascend to become wealthy men, like LeBron James, as Michelle McKenzie said. LeBron James, I'm a big LeBron James fan. I think he's a very intelligent young man. And one of the things that I think that his wealth was accumulated not just because his own mind, but having people around him that has his best interest at heart. So, you got people that's working on his behalf all the time that's thinking like, oh, LeBron, well, let's get the portfolio together for Mr. James. We want him to invest in this company. We want him to invest in this stock. We want him to invest in the next whatever, right? So I don't know if Mike Tyson or Lamar Odom had the opportunity to do that, but they could have been, as drugs is involved, they could have been associated with the wrong people, even in the camp, from the environment. If your manager don't have your best interests at heart, if the women you sleeping with don't have your best interests at heart, you're always vulnerable to disaster.
Well, I don't disagree with you. And by the way, everybody, you are listening to Dr. Boyce Watkins and Madam President. Madam President and I, we're talking about athletes and why some professional athletes lose all their money. And if you could do us a favor, please hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe, all these other things. And also Madam President's website. She has an apparel company. It's thefreedom.company. Thefreedom.company is up here on the screen. Also, One Madam President. Everybody should go follow her on Instagram at One Madam President. Now, those of you who are wondering where my Instagram went, right now it's been deleted. We're working to get it back. But I do have a backup. You always got to have a plan B. So if you want to follow me at the Black Financial Channel, that's a good place to go. You can get financial information, things like that. And then also you can text the word stock to 31996. Text stock to 31996. I'll send you a copy of my $5 a day investing plan. I'll also send you a list of AI stocks that I believe are going to do well in the future. Also, just today, earlier, I sent out a link to a stock that I'm going to buy this week, and I'll do that every single week. So just text the word stock to 31996. And also this podcast is on Spotify. All right, so give me a yes or no, everybody. Yes or no. What do you think? I mean, do you think that that it's the environment that causes the majority of the reason that a lot of athletes go broke, or do you think it's personal choices? What do you all think? Do you think that it's a matter of just like there's nothing they could do there, it's just the way the world works and they grew up poor and all this, or I'm gonna say this, Madam President, I'll have to say I think that it's interesting to me. What's interesting to me, Madam President, is these guys, when people say, well, they couldn't learn about finances because look at the environment, look at how they grew up, look at how they came up. But I'm like, okay, but you learned how to be one of the best basketball players in the world. Somebody had to teach you that. You had to pay attention to learn how to dribble, shoot, run the West Coast, East Coast offense. You know what I mean? Play against the zone defense. You know what I mean? You had to learn these things. Right. Mike Tyson, if you watch him box, he knows everything about timing and everything else. And you can see him in the gym. You see all these legendary videos of him spending thousands of hours learning how to be the best fighter in the world. And then if you talk about rappers, it takes a lot of time to learn how to be a great artist, right? And so the question, I think, the challenge I think we have to give ourselves is, if you're spending all this time learning how to be a great athlete and you became great at it, you spend all this time learning how to be a great boxer, whatever it is, or great rapper, or whatever it is people do, great actor. It takes probably 1/50th of that amount of time to learn how to basically manage money. Like literally, I could teach people in a weekend enough that they could at least prevent becoming like a Mike Tyson. It wouldn't take like thousands of hours in the gym to learn the basics of money management, right? It wouldn't take thousands of hours in the gym to learn how to start a business. It wouldn't take thousands of hours in the gym to learn how to not spend all your money. Like I spent 4 hours teaching in Seattle, and people are transformed. They understand what to do now, right? So I think that some of it is just bad culture. I think that it's like you spend, if you just took the 1/10 of the time that some of these guys spend in the strip club, they, and had them spend that time in the classroom just learning how to watch over their millions in assets, they will be in a better position. But I think culture, when your culture is bad, Like if your culture's telling you to take your bread and go and put it in a stripper thong, and your culture's telling you to buy Mercedes Benzes for all your homeboys, when the culture's telling you that you got this pretty girl, so you're gonna buy her 8 pairs of red bottoms because you want to show off, then it doesn't matter if somebody's teaching you. Like guys like that, they have people like me around all the time. And where we're like, hey, I'll help you. Tell me what to, just let me talk. I was on the phone for 10 hours with Kanye West, and I was like, well, I have some ideas on your financial stuff, but do you want to hear it? And when he didn't want to hear it, I said, okay, well, then you're wasting my time and I'm wasting yours. Have a nice day. So what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that maybe there's a personal choice dimension that tends to get left out because we want to see the black man as a victim? That's what I think is kind of the problem here. What do you think?
Well, I definitely don't think that the black, it's not healthy to view black men as the victim. I do believe that we have to all have personal accountability. I'm personal accountability. And I think that comes at a certain age. The teenagers say, oh, mom and dad, let me drive the car. And everybody in the mom and dad is like, no, you can't drive the car, because the teenager isn't aware that all the different things that can happen on the road, right? But when you become older, you start paying your own insurance. You see the deductible. You see all the different things that happens in the car. You understood why your mom and them didn't give you the keys, but that doesn't come until a level of emotional maturity. When you think about Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson was 12 years old, not very educated. His education was not the most important thing, which makes me believe that on an emotional level, Mike Tyson was operating and fighting men in the ring and had the strength of grown men, but the emotional intelligence of a little boy. So that means that he was like, I don't want to make him a victim, but I'm just saying, we're talking about emotional intelligence. A person, like the sister said, he was throwing money out the window. That's not a very smart person that's going to throw money out the window. That's not a person who's thinking futuristically. These men were never from environments that were thinking about a future for them. The one thing that I think our community and our culture kind of don't even really realize is, we kind of, the YOLO attitude, you only live once. That's a bunch of BS. You need to live long. And the conversation when these young men enter into these professional arenas is how to make my money last over 100 years. That's the first question. But you got to have the intelligence to ask that question. So then they can have an accountant that says, you know what, Mr. Tyson, let me give you some ideas where, you can get knocked out and still have money working for you, for years to come. These people, like I love to say, a lot of celebrities, a lot of rich Black folks are literally like little poor people live check to check. These rich folks live big check to big check, okay? They just because they're making a lot of money doesn't mean that they're holding on to all that money. So I don't want to take away personal accountability from them, but I don't think these young men were cultivated into ideas of futuristic thinking. Oh, I'm going to have this in 25 years, or what do I do in 50 years? They live in the now. And as you can see, they blew all the money in those moments.
Well, you know what? By the way, everybody, you listen to Madam President, and we're talking about celebrities. We started off with talking about Mike Tyson and Lamar Odom and why celebrities lose all their money. If you could do me a favor, please hit the thumbs up button, thumbs up, share, subscribe. Madam President's apparel company is the freedom.company. That's her Black-owned business. So if you support Black-owned businesses, you want to see some amazing super Black-owned apparel, go to the freedom.company. Also, you can follow Madam President at one Madam President. In addition to that, we have a social media platform called blackenough.com. So if you are Black enough, then join us at Black Enough. And I'm going to put it on the screen so you can spell it BLAGGENUF.com. Feel free to connect with us. Don't worry about Instagram and all that. We got plenty of backups and stuff like that. Okay, so let's so when you talk about Tyson and Lamar Odom and just some of the money problems, and you see this consistently happen with celebrities. I'm gonna tell you, this weekend I was in Seattle, Madam President, and I did we did a 4-hour deep dive training on my book. My new book is called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. And one of the things that I started everybody off with, I started them off by giving them WIC, WIC. And, WIC, we know about WIC is kind of like a program for, a welfare program. But I said here, WIC, WIC stands for wealth is cultural. Wealth is cultural. Wealth is cultural. Wealth is cultural. And what do I mean by that? Well, because there are some families where nobody goes to business school, nobody gets any financial training, nobody does anything special in terms of spending $100,000 going to college, learning how to manage finances, but everybody ends up being economically good. There are lots of businesses being created. There's lots of wealth being preserved. There's people are sitting on their money for generations, and the reason for that is because there's a culture of wealth, just like everything's cultural. Fitness is cultural. Intellectualism is cultural. All these things. And so one of the things I think that we have to be conscious of is that there are people out there that want Black people, especially, to have a culture that is wealth depleting. They want us to have a culture that is led with devastation and destruction. They want to see the Black man on his knees. They want to see the Black woman broken in poverty. They want to see the Black family, in the toilet. And so these stories, it's kind of unfortunate to me that we just get used to this. We almost think that that's part of being Black. Like, if you ain't poor, then you ain't Black. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Give me a yes if y'all know what I'm talking about. Where there are some people who really think that if you're like, remember, like when the Huxtables came out with the Cosby Show, a lot of people were saying that we don't like that show because it's not realistic. They're like, it's not realistic to have a mother and a father married that love each other, and one's a doctor, one's a lawyer. But they looked at Good Times. They felt like Good Times was very realistic. Always in the struggle, always barely an inch away, keeping your head above water, making a wave when you can, temporary layoffs, good times, easy credit, rip-offs, getting ripped off. Like, that's like, people thought that was very realistic. And so I think that maybe we have to start thinking about, like, what is really realistic and what is really expected. Like that, and I do agree with you, though, that if you grow up in an environment where you're used to, like, if you're a young man and you're used to watching older men throw their lives away, then you are encouraged to do that. And I, because I grew up around that. I got uncles and cousins, alcoholics, drug addicts, prison, early death, whatever, suicidal pretty much. And what I noticed is that the reason for that to happen, I think, is that when you start saying stuff like, that's going to kill you, right? People are like, oh, stop it. You being judgmental, or you being a nerd, or you being a square, or you being a simp, right? Like, I've heard that word simp before, in terms of people saying, like, well, if you ain't sleeping with every girl that walks by, where you're going to have 1,000 STDs and a bunch of child support, then you're a simp or whatever, right? And it's kind of like that's the culture. The culture is amongst a lot of Black men that you must destroy yourself before a certain age. And if you're not like DMX, dead by the age of 45, then you ain't really living like a brother, And I remember consciously saying, man, to hell with y'all, F all of y'all. My father gave me the courage to tell these Negroes, like, to kiss my ass, and I did. I was like, I'm not going to drink myself into an early grave, because I've seen how a man looks when he's an alcoholic, like how bad, how pathetic he looks to his family. Your kids can't even respect you. I've seen what men look like when they get high on dope and they, on drugs. I've seen how sad men look when they're broken, struggling all the time, and whatever. I've seen what a lazy man looks like, right? And I would see all this, and I was like, I don't want to be that guy. And there's so many men who think that way, but what happens is that in the media, they don't promote those men. They promote the men who make themselves into victims, and then they say, oh, look at the Black man, that poor little boy, he's such a pathetic little victim. That's why their community ain't crap, because their men are garbage. And then they tell Black women to go marry a white man because Black men ain't nothing. I don't know if anybody else notices that, but that's what I see. Do I sound too cynical? What do you think?
No, you don't sound too cynical, but you do sound like a Black man who, really, you took the environment that was around you, and you got a lot of intrinsic motivation, and basically you're very intelligent as well. I mean, you can solve math problems probably that 75 to 80% of the world can't solve. So I think that, you're very intelligent, and you probably can be put in the middle of an ocean and you'll find dry land. That's you. Sometimes I'm wondering, like, what happens to us overall, more of a collective versus like from an individual basis. And I agree with you. Like, if we all are adapting to such a destructive culture, then we just don't even understand the prerequisite of maintaining wealth. Like, we don't even get it, like, we can't even understand the requirement of sustaining wealth. So you'll have, for example, I like to use this book I read, Breaking the Psychological Chains of Slavery by Naeem Akbar. And that was one of my first books when I was in college that really gave me an insight on the mental slavery of Black people. So you have a lot of Black folks who literally have adapted culture that don't belong to them. For example, like, buying a whole bunch of expensive clothes, but then not having actual money. Who you trying to look good for? So we have a culture of people that's committed to the wrong things, and it's time out for it, because we going into a new dimension where the robots are here alive and well, and you're going to let a robot come and outdo you. Meanwhile, you still gonna, you still gonna be in poverty when there's so many things that we can create. And also, too, I just really feel like that our community, like, it's not just the men, but the women have to be encouraging too. And I like to say that the women, the sisters, the mothers, the aunties, the nephews, the nieces, we have to understand, like, if you dating a woman, you tell her you trying to save money so that you can get something that is going to maybe get a piece of property. If she's going to come in the house and say, well, I want the Birkin bag, it's my birthday, she's against what's required for you to sustain wealth. So it's a group collective, in the Jewish community and the Asian community, all these other communities are collectively on board when it comes to sustaining wealth. But let me tell you something, Dr. Watkins, a lot of us are collectively on board for destruction. So you can get a bunch of people to meet you over to the crib on a Friday to get high, drink, and do all those things that's going to put you to the grave as quickly as possible. But if you ask those same people to meet you to the house on Friday to start reading and writing out ideas and start creating systems and start learning science and math, I guarantee you they'll tell you crazy.
Wow, preach. I mean, I think that's so. I don't know about y'all, but I love what I'm hearing there. I mean, I think that what you said it evokes so much passion. What's up, Dr. Vibe? I see you in there, brother. It's and you're so accurate with that. You're so accurate with that. And it's and this is why I'm telling everybody it's very important that you are selective about who you pick in your circle. Because you're going to absorb energy from those people. You're going to their mindset is going to affect your mindset. You may think that you can always rise above it and you can fix everybody and save everybody, but unfortunately, some people won't. You won't save them; they'll sink you, right? Some people, their anchor is too heavy. You're not going to pull them up. They're going to pull you down. And and what I see here is, and I appreciate you making saying the kind words about my intelligence, and I receive that, right? I do receive the fact that I'm not a stupid person, and I'm really good as a scholar. But at the same time, here's the thing. It takes a genius also to be a great rapper. And I meet rappers. I can identify intelligence very well. I meet a lot of rappers who are geniuses. Unfortunately, some of them get caught where they're trying to emulate an ignorant culture. And the genius that could be used to elevate that culture is instead used for them to simulate that culture. They know exactly what clothes to wear, how to walk, how to talk, how to sag, how to do everything that you do to fit in. And some of these guys will be super smart, right? Well, because we have a culture that's unfortunately anti-intellectual, that says if you act smart and you're a Black man, you're out of place. You're not behaving the way you're supposed to behave. And also a lot of people don't know this, but when you talk about, like, a lot of people assume I'm smarter than, like, say, football players. They don't know that the reason I could, why I couldn't play football, Madam President?
Why you couldn't?
Why I never got put in the game. I was the second fastest. I was faster than every single football player on my high school team, and I was also the second fastest on my middle school team. There was one kid who was faster than me, Rico Francis, but he was literally national champion in the 100-meter dash. Like, that's how fast he was. So, but literally, so do you know why they didn't let me play?
No, why?
Because I could not memorize the plays.
Really?
I did not know the plays. Yeah. So the coach put me in. And he put me in a running back, and he said, okay, we're going to run a 44 blast. And I'm thinking, I don't know what a 44 blast is. And so I was going to try to fake it. He said, ready, set, hike. The whole team went left, and I ran to the right. And he said, get out of here. Just sit your ass on the bench. So my point is to say that we think that genius only shows itself when it comes to scholarship and mathematics and all that. No, that's a facade. Genius shows itself in so many other ways. I see genius all the time on the internet. When you see a 3-year-old that can twerk like Cardi B and she's not even in preschool yet, oh, that's genius. That's
Right.
just misapplied genius, but that's genius, okay? Or when you see a little boy that can rap, or you see a little kid that can play basketball. Like, those are other forms of genius. It's just the difference was I applied my intelligence to things that were going to get me into a career that was going to help me make money, right? But that same amount of energy could have also been put into me becoming a better football player, basketball player. I just didn't have the talent, right? So because I didn't have the talent to be an athlete, and I didn't have the swag to be a rapper, I went and think about this. I'm friends with people like Ice Cube. Like I used to want to do stuff like that. I just wasn't as smart as those guys, or as good, or as capable. So I just said, okay, I'm going to apply that same work ethic I learned from sports and apply it to academics. I'm applying it to this finance thing because if I study money and learn about money, somebody will pay me money to talk about money. That was my logic. I said, if I want to get good at something, I need to go study it. And a lot of people talk about wanting to have money. Everybody's money, money, money. Everybody rap about money. I'm money over everything. I want money, money, money. And then you say, well, if you want money so bad and money's that important to you, how much time do you actually physically spend on a regular basis learning about money? And they'll say, well, none. And I'll be like, well, think about this for a minute. What in the world makes you think that you're going to be good at something when you never practice? Like if I say I want to win a Super Bowl, but if you say, well, how much time do you spend in football practice? And I say, well, none, but I still want to be Tom Brady. Okay, well, how many reps did you throw? How often do you go watch game film? Give me a yes if y'all understand what I'm saying. Like, and I say, well, none. I don't even know what a football looks like. But you try to be Tom Brady. That don't make no damn sense. So I think it's common sense, and you ain't got to be no rocket scientist to understand that to be good at something, you got to practice. If I want to be the best twerker in the world, well, guess what? I got to be in the gym. The real good. One time I went to Magic City because I had to go for a bachelor party, and you know what I noticed, Chanel? I noticed how athletic and how well trained the women are. I said, you got to be a badass woman to be able to swing from the pipes 50 feet in the air and still be twerking while you up there. I couldn't believe it. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of training. So that was a type of genius. That's somebody who said, I want to be good at something, and in order to be good at this thing, I'm going to practice. So I don't understand why people don't understand how that applies to money. Money don't just fall out of a tree. Money comes to the people who practice. So if I play football and I've never practiced and I'm out of shape and I play against a guy who trains every day, who's always in the gym, who's always working out, who's always reading plays, who's always preparing, and I show up and I ain't prepared at all, I'm gonna get my ass kicked.
Right.
So basically the same thing happens with money. If you ain't been to money camp, if you ain't been in training camp, you show up and you sit next to that white man, that Jewish man, that Asian man who's been in money camp every day of his life since he was a little boy. Guess what? When you sit down across the table from him and y'all negotiate a deal, he's gonna whoop your ass, just like you will be whooping his ass on the basketball court. Madam President, what say you?
Yeah. So I was just thinking about from a community standpoint. I don't know the guy, but I think his name is Sterling. He was the owner of one of the
Clippers, Donald Sterling.
Yep. Him. He has a thing against Magic Johnson. He don't like Magic Johnson. Talk about Magic Johnson like a dog. But in the video, as he was talking about Magic Johnson very negatively, he just said something like, why is this man, in a community, in their community, they don't, in our community, we give interest-free loans. He said, that's what we do. This is how we help our community. When I tell you they're committed to each other, and on every level, and they're committed on every level. The men, the women, the children are all committed to each other's success. And that's one of the things that I think our community has to understand as well. Even sometimes sustaining young Black men's wealth requires support from the women, support from the children. The sister at the strip club, when they see a rapper coming through the door, it's ching ching. I don't know if you ever saw Players Club, but Bernie Mac, he hit that thing. Hey, get your ass up, everybody. So, and that's the thing that we have. But here's the thing. That's how we have to be with them to keep the money. We got to be like, hey, we got a brother. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars. That's where the accountants come from. That's where, you know, the investors come from that, hey, look, I already know. I think, I don't know, Jay-Z said a time or two, he said he got an accountant that check his accountant. You know, sometimes that's what you got to do because you're always dealing with, you know, people, deception and all those things in our community. So I think that it's a group effort. I'm not trying to take away from these men being fully accountable for the money that they have. But another thing we never really talked about, Dr. B, is the fact that these men got this, you know, access to wealth with a natural talent. You know, they did things that they loved. I don't know if they ever consider I've worked so hard for this. Because I believe that some people, you know, the avenue of, hey, I'm gonna go to college, hey, I'm gonna do this. There's a sense of I've worked really hard for this. I can't just give this away. But because how these men possibly obtained all this money, maybe it never felt like hard work for them. This is just me throwing out a perspective that I never really said out loud.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think that's a good point. So you're saying that because they work hard, that's what might cause them to splurge, or what do you mean?
Well, the detachment just may be different. You know, when you work, it's like the value. The value of the dollar is completely different from the person who's worked really hard for it and the person who hasn't worked really hard for it.
Yeah. Well, you know, that is a good point. Like, because what a lot of people don't talk about is that a lot of times when athletes and entertainers get a lot of their money, they're very, very young. And when you receive, you know, millions of dollars and you ain't nothing but 22 years old, you're going to deal with it different than somebody who's like 42, who's been busting their butt, you know, for decades to get that first opportunity. And and that is 100% true. And that's where I think some grace can be given. But also as a requirement, you know, these guys got to be trained to listen to older people. You got to listen to your OGs. You can't be out here, you know, you got you know, some little man who's not from your community who wants to be up next to you. And then you got Becky trying to date you. And none of these people were checking for you when you were broke. None of these people want to be around you when you was in the projects. None of these people wanted anything to do with you when you were struggling. But they definitely want a big piece of you when they can eat off of you. But they wasn't around for you when you were the hungry one and trying to eat, and you would have eaten off of them. So I think that you know, there's still choice that does come into play with this. And what I think happens to the Black community is that the Black community ends up feeling a connection to these guys because they become successful athletically, and we look up to them and we admire them. But a lot of them kind of forget about the Black community. You know, when they're looking to hire a lawyer, an accountant, an agent, some of them completely abandon the Black community, and then they come back to the Black community when everything's messed up. You know, and you know,
I like that.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off. Finish your statement, sir.
No, it's like Jonathan Majors. Jonathan Majors, you know, he wasn't dating no Black women, and now that he's in trouble and his career's in jeopardy, he shows up in court with Megan Good, and I think that that might be genuine love. I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm just saying, like, well, why weren't you dating her when your career was at its peak? Why do we only get bargain basement discount Negroes? Why don't people show up for the Black community when they're in their premium stage and not in their bargain basement, like I don't have no other option stage? That's my point.
Okay, so now you make a really good point, and but there's something that I really heard about the Black community, read too, that the one thing that our community kind of missed a great deal of is the cultivation of like Black genius, right? So one of the things that we missed as a community was when people like Mike Tyson, when people like Lamar Odom, when people like Michael Jordan, like they get all of their buildings up through the community, right? But as soon as the wealth is attached, the first thing that white supremacy does in general is start to separate them from that community. I don't know if this Nat Turner was talking about in the book. Nat Turner was able to read, this former slave. He was able to read. So once they discovered that he was excellent and could read, they wanted to not allow him to be in the fields anymore. But this young kid have to be smart. We want to bring him in the house because this is a young, good boy that can read. So all that to say that, you know, when you start displaying a certain level of genius, I don't know if you ever noticed this about athletes, Dr. B, and that is Gabby Douglas. she was removed from her mother when she needed to go to become a champion. Kyrie Richardson, you know, she wasn't with her mother, I don't believe, but whenever Black people are trying to get to Olympian states or places where they at the peak of American sports, the first thing is they are removed from the house. They're removed from the community. They are removed from their mother. And, you know, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's resources. Like, hey, you got more access to state of the art sports center, etc. You get access to more training. But whatever that is, there's a separation that's there. And when that separation happens, sometimes it never is repaired.
Mm. Well, you know what? And I agree with you. What's unfortunate is it becomes a cultural separation. What people don't know is they used to do that to the Native Americans too. When they were trying to train when they were trying to integrate Native Americans and train them to be white, they would pull them out of their village and take them to a special school where they would tell them you can't speak your native language, you cannot wear your native clothes, you have to be just like a white man. And then what they would do in order to lure in other young Native Americans is they would do exactly what they do with Black people. They would take the person that went to the white school and they would put him back in the community, and he would have the most money and the most power and the most resources. So all the young kids, they knew the young kids would look up to him and want to be like him. Right. They knew that young kids would follow him. Now, I hope everybody's getting what I'm saying here, because I need you to understand the connection and the blueprint. So effectively, what they do now is the same thing. They take people out of the community and they give them a different culture, and then these people become the ones that they put on TV. They don't put smart Black men on TV. They don't put smart Black women on TV. They don't put the Dr. Claude Andersons or the Francis Cress Welsings on TV. They put the people that go along and fit the agenda. And then these people end up having the most money, and then we turn around and say, oh, that person's a role model. Ooh, I look up to so-and-so because I like their album. Or so-and-so is, is the greatest whatever because they won an Oscar or won a Grammy or whatever, won some award that literally was made up. And the thing is, what happens is you end up ignoring the people in the community that not only are very talented, but also really have the Black community as their first priority. They're not trying to go impress white folks. They're trying to impress the people that love them, the people that they love first. And then they might try to impress the world. But those people are not the ones that are going to be put on television. That's why the ownership of Black media, Black people owning media, is really, really important, because you have to be able to create your own heroes, your own role models. Because if you don't, they will take the most degenerate, screwed up person. This is why your Black men are struggling. This is why your Black men are falling apart, because a lot of them are following these damn rappers. A lot of them are looking at the rappers and saying, I want to be like him. I want to be like this guy. Well, think about it. This guy is, he smokes dope all day. He drinks all day. He don't respect women. He wants to kill other Black people, and he wastes all his money, and he loves being ignorant. But yet they have your children looking up and saying, ooh, that's Black excellence. That's success. That's the man that I want to be like. Well, then why are you surprised when you look around in the community? I hear Black women that are 40 and up that are out here in the dating world that are basically talking about the fact that these men, they don't want to get married. They don't want to do the things that they need a husband to do, because unfortunately, a lot of your men have been made very immature because of the culture that's being promoted to them. And then on top of that, they didn't have a daddy to begin with that even taught them anything about manhood. So you're not getting men. You're getting a bunch of little boys with beards. That's what you have. You have a lot of bearded babies out here that they can still get you pregnant, still ruin your life and all these other things, but they're not able to really get things done.
Right.
I'll let you get the last word, Madam President, please.
Well, the only thing I want to include is that, the women have to take responsibility too. We are also people that we mold a culture. We mold what's cool. So men know that they can attract a certain kind of woman, but it'll start changing. I think in the play aspect, Lysistrata, if women start withholding and not giving their goods to men that are not quality in the community, then men start straighten up. Just like when men were wearing perm, some women say, I ain't dating no man with no perm. And so men who would not wear perm, when the women start saying, no, we don't do that, we don't date with men with perms and things of that nature. We are all in this together, and how we behave, we're constantly molding our society. And just like you said, these men that are not pretty much doing anything, holding their weight in their own community, they shouldn't even be able to have a child. It shouldn't be a woman on the planet that's open that's open to opening her legs to a man who A, don't take care of the children that he had, B, unavailable, unemotional, and no emotional intelligence, no financial education. We have to be accountable too. So I just really want to highlight that. And the thing about wealth is, if Black people, if we're really going to get to wealth, if we're really going to sustain wealth, and I see a lot of people say things like, what are the solutions? Let me tell you something, Black people. We've come through a people of Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, W.B. Du Bois. We've come through so many people that provided, Booker T. Washington, so many people that provided solutions. The solutions are there. Start with your household, start with your own children, and start building, and stop thinking that there's somebody coming to save you. You know, if you get access to hundreds of millions of dollars, then I think the first thing you need to do is call Dr. Boyce Watkins.
Well,
10 commandments of wealth. You can hold on to it for, you know, generations.
The 10 commandments of Black economic power. There you go. Yeah. But yeah, that is the name of the book. And I'll tell you, you know, another thing you mentioned, you're right. I mean, women do play a big part in the shaping of the men, just like the men play a part in the shaping of the women. And sometimes we forget that a lot of these men, when you get to complaining about the men, you got to be careful, because a lot of these men were raised by women. Yes. You know, and some of these women somehow thought they could do it without the father's help. And then next thing you know, you've plagued other women, you've cursed other women by releasing a man out into the wild who is not going to be a man. Right. So because in your mind, he's still your baby, but now he's 40 and he got 8 girls pregnant and he ain't taking care of none of the kids. Well, who was the one that allowed him to go through life thinking that there was no responsibility and no accountability? So this immaturity that's been sort of promoted, it's all of our responsibility. All of us played a part. And I think we could just start fixing it partially by being thoughtful about who we have, you know, about what we're doing sexually and having kids. You know, people, that's one thing that people seem to forget. They seem to forget that, you know, sex makes a baby. And because we're traumatized people tend to self-medicate through various forms of addictive personalities, which might show up in poor choices when it comes to relationships, dating, and sex. And next thing you know, you're in a bad situation because of that. So anyway, I want to say thank you, Madam President. It was real. I really enjoyed hanging out with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and everybody, you can follow Madam President at one Madam President. Her URL. I want to put it on the screen. Madam President with a Z. I can't put it on the screen, Madam President, because something's going on with my system. So sorry for that.
It's okay.
But it's one Madam President with a Z, the number one Madam President. Also, my name is Boyce Watkins. My website's boycewatkins.com. Also, if you'd like to get Dr. Boyce profit alerts of stocks that I believe in, stocks that I'm invested in, I can send you that list for free. Just text the word stock to 31996. If you text stock to 31996, I will send you right now the $5 a day investing plan and some other things that'll help you make money and get ahead in the world. So God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Madam President. It was real. It was great to see you again. Okay. All right. Talk to you guys later. Let me hit some buttons here. I got to reach over and hit buttons now because I mess everything up. All right. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.